The room was already tense when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped into the CNN studio. Lights overhead blazed like spotlights in a courtroom, and the producers whispered commands behind the glass. Tonight's broadcast wasn't just another political panel, it was a showdown. AOC had requested the slot herself. She was ready to call out the dangerous rhetoric of someone she called a rising face of far-right propaganda. Karoline Leavitt waited, already seated under the glare of the studio lights, her expression calm, lips barely curved into a smile. She wore a crisp navy blue blazer, the kind that said, "I'm young, but I'm not here to play." Her hands were folded neatly, but her eyes tracked every movement in the studio with unflinching focus. The host, Anderson Cooper, glanced between the two women like a referee about to ring the bell. "Tonight," he began, "we have Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Karoline Leavitt, former White House staffer and conservative commentator. Tensions have been high and America is watching." AOC didn't wait. She leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Karoline represents everything wrong with the new wave of right-wing media, manufactured outrage, culture wars, and zero substance. We need to stop pretending that this is just about opinions. It's about dangerous misinformation." Karoline didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, voice controlled. Coming from someone who built a brand on sound bites and emotional manipulation, that's rich. Gasps scattered through the control room. The first punch had been thrown and caught clean. AOC's jaw tensed, but she forced a smile. "Cute, but you're spreading lies that divide Americans. Your party thrives on fear, fear of change, of progress, of truth." Karoline leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "No, we thrive on facts. And the fact is, you push policies that sound good on TikTok but collapse in real life. You shout truth to power, while voting to give that power more control." The crowd in the studio shifted, a mix of stunned silence and soft applause. Anderson looked stunned. "Okay, let's keep this civil." But Karoline wasn't holding back. Not tonight. Not with the nation watching. Karoline didn't break eye contact. Her voice remained calm, but each word cut through the studio like a scalpel. "You want to talk about fear, Congresswoman? Let's talk about the fear small business owners feel when your policies raise taxes and choke them with red tape. Or the fear parents feel when they're told they can't have a say in what their kids are taught." AOC leaned back, eyes narrowing, her arms crossing tightly. "Typical deflection. You turn every issue into a moral panic. Drag shows, textbooks, gas stoves. That's what you think matters. Meanwhile, families are struggling with real issues like health care and housing." Karoline tilted her head, her smile sharpening. "And yet, under your leadership, housing costs have skyrocketed, border security has collapsed, and working-class families are still getting crushed. But hey, at least the hashtags are inclusive, right?" The audience stirred. Even Anderson Cooper glanced at his notes, unsure how to intervene. AOC sat forward again, her voice rising now, clearly irritated. "You talk a big game, Karoline, but you've never had to govern. You've never had to write a real policy, only criticize others from the sidelines. It's easy to be loud when you don't have responsibility." Karoline didn't miss a beat. "You mean like when you wore a $10,000 dress to a gala full of billionaires while claiming to fight for the poor?" That hit hard. The studio fell silent for a second. The air was heavy with tension. Someone in the audience let out a muffled "oof." Anderson raised a hand, trying to diffuse the flames. Let's keep this focused, please." But Karoline leaned in slightly, her tone unwavering. "I may not be in Congress, Alexandria, but I'm not afraid to say what millions of Americans feel, and I'm not going to apologize for speaking truth just because it makes you uncomfortable." AOC's lips tightened. Her eyes flashed. The momentum was slipping and she knew it. Karoline sat back, composed, unapologetic, steady as a rock. The camera panned slowly, catching her posture, the calm in the storm. In just a few minutes, the tide of the conversation had shifted. And this wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. AOC adjusted her microphone, her polished media mask beginning to crack. "You know what the real problem is, Karoline," she said, voice now laced with sharpness. "You pretend to speak for the people, but your words are written for algorithms. You're not representing anyone, you're performing." Karoline blinked once, slowly. "Says the woman who live streams grocery store visits and tweets policy in emojis." A murmur of laughter rippled through the audience. Even Anderson Cooper couldn't suppress a tight smile before quickly hiding it behind his notepad. AOC wasn't laughing. "This isn't a joke," she snapped, her tone shifting into controlled rage. "We're talking about marginalized communities, about people whose lives are impacted every day by systemic injustice." "And yet," Karoline interrupted, cool as ever, "your party's policies keep them locked in dependency, not empowerment. You offer slogans. We offer opportunity." AOC leaned in, her voice rising. "Opportunity? You mean tax breaks for billionaires while cutting support for working moms and veterans?" Karoline's eyes narrowed. "I mean letting Americans keep more of what they earn instead of handing it to bloated government programs that fail year after year." The crowd was no longer still. Half of them were clapping. The other half were visibly uncomfortable. It didn't matter. The air was electric. Anderson tried again to mediate. "Let's keep things from becoming too personal." "Too personal?" Karoline echoed. "Alexandria just accused me of not caring about struggling Americans while she sips iced lattes in a district where rent has doubled under her watch." AOC turned sharply toward Karoline, frustration now fully visible. "You think this is about drinks and dresses? People are suffering." Karoline nodded solemnly. "Yes, and they've been suffering under your leadership." For a moment it was quiet. The kind of silence that happens when a room realizes a line has been crossed, or a truth has been hit. AOC sat back, her face expressionless, jaw set. Karoline didn't need to gloat. Her words did the work. She wasn't just debating anymore, she was exposing the cracks. And for the first time tonight, the audience wasn't just listening. They were watching closely. As the commercial break hit, the studio lights dimmed, but the tension didn't. Behind the cameras, producers whispered frantically into headsets. On social media, the clash was already going viral. Twitter, now X, was flooded with hashtags. Leavitt dominates, AOC exposed, live fire debate. Karoline Leavitt scrolled briefly through the chaos on her phone during the break. Thousands of retweets, tens of thousands of likes. She locked her screen and looked up, expression composed. AOC, meanwhile, sat with her team on set, speaking through gritted teeth. "She's baiting me. If I go harder, they'll say I'm too emotional. If I back off, they'll say I lost." One of her aides whispered, "We need you to pivot to climate or healthcare, move the conversation." But the next segment didn't give her the chance. As soon as the broadcast returned, Anderson Cooper set the tone. "Welcome back. In case you're just tuning in, tensions are high. Let's continue with our topic on national security and individual rights." Karoline leaned in, calm and confident. "Here's the real issue. The left treats America like it's something broken that needs to be apologized for. I treat it like something worth protecting." AOC fired back. "Protecting how, Karoline? With bans, fear-mongering, and culture wars? That's not protection. That's regression." Karoline's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Regression is pretending that men can get pregnant and letting crime run rampant while police are defunded. Regression is calling patriotism hate speech. Gasps echoed again. Cooper tried to cut in, but AOC didn't wait. "Oh, I see. So now we're talking about your culture war talking points? This is why your brand survives, not because you offer solutions, but because you provoke outrage." Karoline sat back slightly, her hands folded. "Sometimes the truth provokes outrage, especially when it exposes hypocrisy." The comment landed hard. Outside the studio, conservative media had already clipped that line. On YouTube, A live stream labeled Karoline Shreds AOC in real time was pulling in hundreds of thousands of views. Even liberal viewers were commenting, "I don't like her politics, but Karoline's holding her ground better than I expected." Inside the studio, AOC could feel it. She wasn't losing control, she was losing narrative. And Karoline, she knew exactly what she was doing. The camera zoomed in as Anderson Cooper hesitated, clearly unsure how to regain control. The usual debate rules had collapsed. This wasn't a round table anymore. It was a battlefront. AOC leaned forward, eyes flashing. "You sit there like you're some kind of moral compass, Karoline, but let's be honest. You're a mouthpiece for billionaires playing dress-up as a patriot." Karoline's expression didn't flinch. "And you're a socialist who poses for Vogue while telling working-class Americans they should feel guilty for wanting lower gas prices." A low murmur ran through the audience, then applause, not thunderous, but sharp, clear, and rising. AOC's jaw tightened. "You keep talking about truth, but let's talk real numbers. Under Republican policies, our national debt ballooned, social safety nets were gutted, and income inequality exploded. That's your patriotism at work." Karoline sat up straighter, her voice edged with steel. National debt exploded because of career politicians who spend recklessly on pet projects and foreign aid while ignoring our own cities falling apart. I don't need to be in Congress to understand that basic math. "You don't need to be in Congress," AOC replied, "because your job is to provoke, not to legislate. And that's the problem. People like you throw flames, and we're left picking up the pieces." Karoline didn't blink. "Picking up the pieces? You haven't fixed a single thing. Your district's crime is rising, homelessness is skyrocketing, and your idea of leadership is tweeting platitudes while voting with the party 99% of the time?" That one hit. Hard. The audience responded with mixed gasps and applause. Even some of the studio crew exchanged glances. Anderson finally spoke up. "Let's refocus. We have to respect each other's time." "I respect the American people," Karoline cut in. "That's why I'm here." AOC took a deep breath, trying to recalibrate. "You're here because outrage sells. You're part of the problem." Karoline smiled faintly. "And you're part of the reason voters are walking away from your party. They're tired of excuses. They want results." AOC froze for a split second. Not because she didn't have a response, but because she realized Karoline was controlling the tempo now. She wasn't just defending, she was advancing. And in the living rooms across America, viewers knew it too. By the sixth segment, the energy in the room had flipped. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just holding her ground, she was steering the conversation. AOC, usually confident in front of any camera, was now second-guessing her every word. Even Anderson Cooper's neutral tone had shifted. He seemed more cautious, choosing each word as if walking through a minefield. Social media was ablaze. Trending nationwide. # Karoline versus AOC # truth. Hits hard # viral smackdown. On conservative feeds, Karoline was hailed as the future. Even some independent voices were admitting, "Didn't expect it, but Karoline is wiping the floor tonight." Inside the studio, AOC reached for water. Her hand trembled slightly. Karoline watched, then calmly resumed, voice as smooth as ever. "Let me ask you something, Alexandria. You talk about justice, equity, all these lofty ideas. But who actually benefits from your policies?" AOC set her glass down. "The people who've been left behind. The ones ignored by decades of trickle-down economics and political games." Karoline nodded, leaning in. "And yet, your policies push middle-class families out of their homes with inflated energy costs and punitive tax hikes. You talk about lifting people up, but all I see is control and dependency." Anderson tried to interject. Let's remember, Karoline said, overriding him, "that freedom isn't dangerous. Big government is." AOC's response came fast, desperate to regain the rhythm. Freedom doesn't mean letting corporations poison our air, Karoline. It doesn't mean letting people die because they can't afford insulin. Your idea of liberty ends where someone else's survival begins." Karoline paused, letting the moment breathe. Then she said, "Survival doesn't come from Twitter slogans or government handouts. It comes from opportunity, real opportunity, and your policies kill it." This time, the applause wasn't mixed. It was solid, and AOC knew it. A crack had formed, not just in her argument, but in her image. She'd underestimated Karoline. And now she was scrambling to reframe, recenter, recover. But Karoline wasn't playing defense anymore. She had momentum. And in a live broadcast watched by millions, that momentum was everything. Karoline sat back slightly in her chair, not out of retreat, but out of calm domination. Her tone was steady, her posture firm. She didn't need to raise her voice. She already had the room. AOC shifted in her seat, attempting a more forceful posture. But the edge in her voice didn't sound powerful anymore. It sounded strained. "You want to make this about slogans and tweets?" AOC snapped. "How about we talk about the fact that people in my district live paycheck to paycheck while billionaires fund your campaign machine?" Karoline didn't blink. "You represent one of the most powerful seats in Congress. Yet your own constituents are moving out because they can't afford rent. You've had years to fix that. But instead of results, they got rhetoric." That hit harder than expected. AOC glanced toward the studio audience. A few heads nodded, not at her, but at Karoline. And then came the dagger. Karoline leaned forward just enough to make it personal. "You're not failing because of your intentions. You're failing because your ideas don't work. And the American people are done pretending they do." The silence that followed was piercing. For the first time in the segment, AOC didn't reply immediately. She looked at Anderson Cooper almost as if asking him to step in. But even Cooper hesitated. The balance of power had shifted too far. Karoline pressed the advantage. "You call me young, inexperienced, but maybe that's the problem. You've been in Washington too long. You've mistaken media applause for real-world approval. But out there," she gestured toward the camera, "people aren't clapping." The applause this time was real, loud, prolonged. And AOC, the seasoned debater, the media darling, the headline magnet, sat in silence, caught off guard by a challenger who refused to flinch. Backstage producers were texting executives. "Karoline just flipped the script. This is getting out of control. In her favor." The screen split between both women, one staring straight at the camera with cool intensity, the other blinking, recalculating. Karoline wasn't just in the conversation anymore. She was the conversation. Karoline slowly turned toward the camera. Not in arrogance, but with precision. She knew what she was doing now. This wasn't just about winning a debate. It was about changing momentum, shaping narrative, claiming space. "To everyone watching at home," she said, voice calm and deliberate, "I know what it feels like to be ignored. I know what it feels like when politicians make promises they don't deliver. I'm not here to impress this studio. I'm here to speak for people like my parents, like your neighbors who work 2 jobs just to keep the lights on." The silence was electric. Even AOC didn't move. Karoline continued. "They don't want hashtags. They don't need more slogans. They want dignity, opportunity, freedom, and they're tired of being told they're the problem." She let the last word hang, then shifted her gaze, finally turning back toward AOC. "You're not the voice of the voiceless anymore, Alexandria. You're the echo of a system that failed them." The audience reacted instantly. It wasn't just applause, it was affirmation. People weren't clapping for a line, they were clapping for a feeling they recognized, and for AOC, that was the most dangerous kind of applause. Anderson Cooper finally leaned forward, trying to steer things back. Let's remind viewers this is a policy discussion." But Karoline didn't let go. Policy is personal. When you can't afford eggs, that's policy. When your kids' school teaches them what to think instead of how to think, That's policy. When your city turns into chaos and leaders blame everyone but themselves, that's policy. AOC finally found her voice. You're oversimplifying complex issues for the sake of a soundbite. Karoline smiled. Number, I'm simplifying because people are tired of being gaslit. Boom. That word, gaslit, landed like a strike across every American kitchen table watching at home. It wasn't academic. It was emotional. AOC tried to reply, but the words didn't come fast enough. The camera panned to her for a reaction. All it captured was silence, a stiff jaw, and blinking eyes. Karoline turned back to Cooper. You wanted both sides, there's mine. Now let America decide. The room buzzed. This wasn't the end of the debate, but it was clear Karoline had stopped being a guest on this stage. She was running it. AOC finally leaned forward, attempting to reset. You talk like it's all so simple, Karoline, but what you're doing is stoking division, not offering solutions. Karoline didn't flinch. Division? She repeated, arching an eyebrow. Number, I'm drawing a line between truth and theater. You've mastered the latter. The jab hit hard. AOC tried to laugh it off, but even that sounded forced. Theater? Coming from someone who turned a TV appearance into a campaign speech? Karoline stood her ground. Better a speech of substance than a resume of slogans. The audience reaction was undeniable. Audible gasps followed by laughter, then applause. Online, the moment exploded. Karoline just cooked AOC again. Someone get Alexandria an exit plan. Just Team Karoline trending at #1 back in the studio, Anderson Cooper turned to AOC. Congresswoman, would you like to respond? She nodded, but paused too long. Her hands shifted, grasping for composure. It's easy to criticize when you've never had to govern. Real leadership means compromise. It means understanding nuance, something you don't gain with sound bites. Karoline's smile disappeared, and she leaned in again. You say I've never governed, you're right. But maybe that's why I still remember what accountability looks like. Maybe that's why I'm not okay with telling Americans that failure is progress. You've been in power, Alexandria, and power hasn't made you better, it's made you comfortable. Boom. The studio fell silent. AOC tried to reply, but the sting of that sentence lingered in the air like smoke after a gunshot. It wasn't just a counter, it was exposure. Karoline wasn't just debating anymore. She was dismantling. She was peeling back the polished image AOC had built over years and showing the hollow core beneath it, one carefully curated for media, but no longer insulated from real challenge. And for AOC, there was no safe corner left on that stage. Anderson Cooper adjusted his mic again, trying to regain control of a segment that had long since slipped from his grip. Final thoughts from each of you before we wrap up tonight's discussion, he said, the strain evident in his voice. He turned first to AOC. She hesitated, a brief glance to the audience, to the camera, then back at Karoline. Her voice, when it came, lacked the punch it once carried. Politics shouldn't be about who shouts the loudest, AOC said, trying to sound steady. It should be about empathy, about policy, about justice. She paused. But tonight, it felt like theater. Karoline didn't miss a beat. Then maybe you should have prepared for the performance, she replied, voice sharp, unfaltering. The audience reaction was instant. Gasps, applause, whistles. Karoline leaned forward, her final blow not just a line, but a hammer. I didn't come here to yell, she said. I came here to win the argument. And while you were busy protecting your image, I was protecting the truth. She turned toward the camera, addressing the nation directly. We've tried their ideas. We've heard their promises. We've watched cities crumble, businesses close, families divide. And now they blame everyone but themselves. Her voice dropped slightly, not weakly, but with the weight of certainty. America doesn't need another hashtag. It needs courage, not manufactured tears, but real answers. And I'm not here to play politician. I'm here to fight for people who've had enough." Cooper tried to jump in, but the applause drowned him out. AOC sat still, her jaw clenched, her hands gripping the edges of her chair. She was staring ahead, not at Karoline, not at Cooper, but somewhere far off, like she knew this wasn't just a bad night. It was a turning point. Karoline Leavitt didn't just win the debate, she rewrote it. As the cameras panned out and the lights began to dim, social media exploded again. AOC outclassed. Karoline dominated. That wasn't a debate. That was a wake-up call. New face of fearless conservatism. And on screen, just before the final fade to black, the camera caught Karoline standing, calm, composed, offering AOC a nod of finality. A gesture not of arrogance, but of victory. And that was the night everything changed. AOC walked into the studio expecting to dominate, but found herself face to face with a rising force she couldn't silence. Karoline Leavitt didn't just defend her ideas, she dismantled the narrative. Line by line, fact by fact, no teleprompters, no rehearsed applause, just conviction. In an age where politics often feels like performance, Karoline reminded millions that truth, when spoken with courage, still cuts through the noise. And while Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez once represented a new voice in Washington, tonight a louder one stepped up. Whether you agree or disagree, one thing is undeniable. Karoline Leavitt is no longer just a name. She's a movement. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more unapologetic moments just like this. The next battle is always around the corner, and we'll be right here to break it down.